Okay, good morning. Please silence your phone if you had it out during the break. Look for all our new spring quarter program that will be distributed next week. You should have received an email Tuesday about a few suggestions for SUBA field trips. Please see Anita Idix and let her know which field trips you would be interested in. Is Anita here? Okay, on the table? All right, you can sign up on the table. And don't forget that we have a winter break with no classes the week of February 17th. And now, please welcome Deborah, your coordinator for this class. I told her I was more than a coordinator. Well, let me start by welcoming all of you here again for the midpoint in our course. We're in class number 4. And as you know, I had a career at the university where it was so curious to me that by midpoint, this is kind of what attendance always looked like. So for those of you who are here, I am just so happy to see you. And I'm particularly happy because we have a guest speaker today. But before I turn it over to our guest speaker, I want to give you some homework for our next class. And I want you to take your phone out and I want you to take a picture of these questions that will drive our conversation next week. And you are the outstanding students who are following instruction. And I love it. And the reason I want you to have these questions in advance is next week we're going to orchestrate what I had hoped for all along, and that is, that real dig in and have conversations. And my original vision was that we would be talking back and forth across every class, but instead we have to work with more of a lecture room. And when we meet next week, there will not be that informative lecture. There will be, we will be driven by these questions. And I want to remind you of my intentions for this class. It was to have those robust conversations, to lean into the fact that I'm in a room of learners and we learn a lot from each other. And so, in support of our learning, I would ask you to do your homework and to kind of consider your thoughts about these questions. And I'll just read them to you as we've gone along. How are you personally viewing what I'm calling self-actualization, realizing your full potential, living your best life? How are you starting to recognize that? I will say that, we teach what we need to learn, and I have not just wanted to talk, I have wanted to walk the walk. And when I came to you for our last class and said, I have hit on my crystal clear goal of being where my feet are, I have really gotten so much value out of that over the past week, because full disclosure, I'm really subject to worrying. And there have been things that have occurred over the last week and 2 weeks that are worrisome to me. And so imagine that. And being able to be where my feet are has been so helpful. And, they've said necessity is the mother of invention. Well, I found it more necessary than ever to just be awake to how wonderful life is where my feet are right now. And then the next question, what do you most enjoy about what you're already doing in your life? Now, I talked to you about bright spots, and, we're not subject to looking for the bright spots. We're inclined to see problems. And, I think of myself as a positive person, but I realized, wow, I'm not taking enough notice of the bright spots. And I will tell all of you, you are a bright spot for me. So thank you. And just other things that I'm already, engaged with on my path. So don't please spend some time really looking at that. And then another thing, because I know all of you have them, what are the simple rules that you're already using in your life? And I thought about some of my rules. One of them is just, I have two simple rules with consumption. One of them is to consider the fiber, go get as much fiber as I can. So rather than trying not to get calories, get as much fiber as I can. And boy, that's a shift in thinking that has really helped me for years. The other thing is to get do you know 11 cups of water for a woman is the recommended amount? And when you do get that water, it makes a huge difference. Two rules that I work from every day. And I know for a fact that Madeline, she has, I guess I would call it a rule. She gave me some great input and feedback when we talked on Friday. And she said, hey, I've got a cool practice that I do every year. At the beginning of the year, I choose 4 words. Is it 4? 6. 6 words that I consider across the year. So I know that all of you have rules and practices that you'll benefit others by sharing. Now, we know that Dave doesn't want to change a thing. He told us that. But what would you like to change or adjust or achieve in your life? And I told him, I said, well, change kind of comes at us whether we want it or not. That's, another thing that happens. And I'm all for, reinforcing the things that you love. And then I notice Arnold isn't here, but he's the one that said, hey, what about those things that get in the way of trying to implement our changes? So, of course, we want to think about the biggest challenges we've got to have a strategy for addressing. So, there's your homework. And when we get together next week, we will do so with the intention of, talking to each other and then reporting back. Okay, good. Now, I am so excited to have Dr. T, and Dr. T is Taryn Hoff. Where are you? There you are. Stand up while I'm introducing you. He is one of the beloved people in my life, and I see him at the Community Wellness Center, which is at Second Ponds Church. Is that? Yeah. It's a part of that, and it's a great place where seniors really are comfortable with one another working on fitness. And Taryn he works very closely with seniors on behalf of fitness. He is Dr. T by way of having his PhD, and he has it in sports psychology, and he also teaches remotely for a university. Which one, Taryn?
The University of Arizona and Grand Canyon University.
And he was at Georgia State at one point, and a pandemic happened, and then he took advantage of remote teaching. But today he is here to support us on our path so that we can stay on it and address the challenges of falling. So I am super excited that he's here, and come on down. Now I get to sit in the back and enjoy just hearing what Taryn has to say.
Thank you, Deborah. Okay, thanks again, Deborah, for that very warm introduction. I truly appreciate it. And Deborah's been a wonderful friend and client and colleague and professional development, and just in both my careers. She mentioned I do teach for a couple of universities part-time, and full-time I run my own personal training business, primarily in Buckhead. But whenever I get an opportunity to do one of these, I jump at the chance because I love to engage and talk to great people like yourselves here and have the opportunity just to go over some important topics. And namely one that we're going to be talking about, as you know, is this fall prevention. And so we'll be talking about that today as we're looking at this here together. And it's the role of balance and stability in healthy aging. So if I was going to ask, just by a number of hands, anybody in the last year or two taken a fall by any chance? Anybody? Yeah, I see a few hands. And my hand's up there as well. If I was doing this presentation a year ago, right now, I would be looking like this in a sling. And that's not a joke. Seriously, January 1st, 2024, I started the year off with a bang by rolling down the stairs. And Deborah, you probably remember seeing me like that in a sling for a few weeks because unfortunately, I fell. Yeah, that's right. I'm not perfect. Us personal trainers, despite myth and rumor, we're not, again, devoid of being able to fall, so to speak, into pits like that, like I did. So that's how I began my year, was taking a fall all the way from the top of my stairs of my house and tumbled all the way to the bottom and dislocated my right shoulder. I couldn't do this a year ago, so I'm really happy that I can do that now. But again, I'm glad that I get to be here injury-free and be able to tell you and laugh about it now. But I saw the hands go up, and as we're talking during the presentation, we're kind of going to go over why this matters, and also talk about some of the objectives. Both, again, what causes falls, right? That's a lot of questions that are running through our minds, and also the questions of what can I do to prevent it, or when it happens, what do I do? Right? A lot of those questions we'll be talking about. Some of the statistics that are important as we go over that with falls is that when the hands went up, it matched about roughly what we know statistically. Every year, there's at least 1 out of 4 people in the senior community of 65 years or older that are going to unfortunately suffer from a fall. So I'm a positive, half glass full type of guy. I look at it saying, well, that's good. That means that 75% or 3/4 of the population aren't falling, right? And so what causes that? One of the questions and the myths that we're going to break today is, well, we all have to fall sometime. We all get older, right? And that's not true. That is totally false. In my opinion, strongly, I very much carry the flag as both a personal trainer and as a university instructor of really preaching that this does not have to happen. It is preventable. Now, yes, there are some things that are unavoidable and some controllables that we have no control over, like our age, ethnicity, and demographics of like gender and such. But some of the things that we can control, that's what we're going to talk about today. And we're going to really delve into that a lot. And some of the other statistics, there's approximately 3 million seniors, again, 65 or older, that are going to be annually treated at emergency rooms because of a fall that they suffered from. In addition to that, there's about 300,000 per year that are seen that are taken in and have some type of major injury. Out of those, about 1/5 of them, so about 20%, are going to end up with a severe injury or even worse, possibly dying from that fall. And so again, it's important to realize when we're talking about this, how that impacts us both personally, professionally, psychologically going forward. Unfortunately, when somebody takes a fall, whether it's short term, we're going to think about how we live our life. Like, for example, this again is true. Like, after a few weeks, I took that dive down my stairs. I was terrified at the top of my stairs, just petrified. And there's no reason that I should have been just because of that happening. In my case, it was probably like a freak accident. I look back on it, and again, I'm sure there are several people in here that have done this, but I just literally slipped on that top stair and then just went and couldn't stop myself. I tried to stop myself the wrong way and grab the railing just because out of instinct, and my shoulder just popped out of its socket, and that was extremely painful. I spent the rest of the day at Piedmont Hospital in just excruciating pain. And that's my hope that that doesn't happen to anybody in here as we're moving throughout the presentation. So as an educator, I really want to talk about, what are those best practices in both learning about falling and balance and stability? What can we do to improve our chances of not falling, okay? And that's what we're going to be taking a look at. A huge part of this presentation as we're discussing this is going to be talking about what you can do. I'm going to repeat that a lot. You'll see that I'll reiterate that you are in control. That's the great news. And doctors will tell you that as well. Whenever we go to see a physician, one of the biggest things that they tell us when we're at the office before they leave, right? They're like, hey, make sure you don't fall, right? Because we hear that when we fall, and you hear about statistics, again, about people that fall and have suffering an injury like breaking their hip. And we hear that once that happens, that might be the end, right? That could be the beginning of the end, so to speak. And unfortunately, there's a small statistic, research has shown that could lead to, unfortunately, death and resulting in serious injury. But again, what can we do? And we're going to take a look at that here. I'm going to demonstrate, again, techniques and stability balance exercises to basically challenge our balance. Because what it comes down to improve your balance, you have to refine and sharpen it. And the way to do that is to put yourself in unstable, imbalanced positions. No different than, for example, when I'm training a client and they're trying to build muscle. Well, the way to get stronger, as you know, the way to build muscle is to break down the muscle fibers. It sounds counterintuitive, right? It sounds like, gosh, you got to hurt yourself to get stronger. Well, that's the way resilience works, as we know, like anything. And so that's a good example, just the same, when you're trying to improve your balance, you want to make sure that you're going to refine and sharpen it by challenging yourself and putting yourself in positions like that. Now, there are different causes of falls. And as I mentioned just a few minutes ago, age is not the number one reason why we fall. That's not by far, it's down there. Statistically, we've accepted that here, that again, as a common just phrase that, well, we're gonna get old and we're gonna fall, it's just gonna happen, it's inevitable. To retrain ourselves and reprogram our brain about that, we're gonna look at some of the causes. What can we do to avoid that? And so one of the things, wherever we're living at, in our homes and such, we have opportunities to address and fix things like that. So using myself as an example again, what could have I done differently when I look back on it? Well, I was wearing socks and my stairs are carpeted, and that leads to, sometimes just having to really be careful because it could be slippery. One thing that I could have done is possibly put like a grittier carpet or even replaced it with hardwood or something that's not as slippery, or maybe wear shoes instead going up and down the stairs next time. So also medical conditions, we hear this as well. A lot of times when physicians are seeing their patients come in, one of the things that they tell them is, well, what were some of the medications that they're on? And we know that there's side effects to different types of medications that we take that could cause, us to be dizzy or nauseous or downright just almost just blacking out. And that's just going to happen sometimes if, again, we have to be careful not to have side effects that are going to affect us like that. So a lot of times you'll hear doctors and nurses advising their patients make sure not to take too much of it, only take it properly. Don't share medications with friends. If you need a sleeping pill, don't ask like a friend and say, hey, look, I need something to help me out. It has to be prescribed, and that's just good old common sense, what we know since we're little, right? We want to make sure that we're doing it the right way and taking medications that again, according to the prescription, and telling our doctors if we do have a side effect, hey, this made me a little dizzy, and they want to know that. That's good information. So take notes if you need to when that happens, or just try to remember if that ever does occur. Now, this slide right here is the beginning of the most important as far as risk factors are concerned, because it's number one. Whenever anybody asks, well, what causes falls, especially for seniors, it's not age, and there's not one all be all answer above this one, because this is it right here. What we're looking at is to increase your muscular strength, your posture, your balance, and improve your core strength. We're going to talk a lot about that and take a look at some of the exercises we're going throughout. So what I mean by that is that, again, it's tricky. There's a lot of complex reasons that can cause people to fall. Nobody's the same for the most part in terms of why somebody would fall. But here it is right here as far as number one reason. And what we can do best to help ourselves is to get stronger. That's why a lot of doctors nowadays are going by the studies, and the research is showing that stronger, for the most part, elderly clients over 65, 70, 85 and above have a better chance of both avoiding falling, but also when they fall, not getting injured as severely as someone who's not as strong or hasn't done like a muscular strength training regimen in their routine. So again, we're going to really pay a lot of attention to that as well. I mentioned this just a few moments ago too, as far as taking precautions of, well, how can I make sure that that doesn't happen again? Always being cognizant of where you're at all times. Like me, this is the first time I've been here, and I don't know anything about this. And Mr. Jim was very helpful in telling me when I go up on the stage, be careful, there's cords and wires and such. So you can bet I'm going to make sure that I pay close attention to that, because the worst thing I could do is fall accidentally in front of all of you. That would be really embarrassing. Then I'll never be asked back here, right? So hopefully, let's keep our fingers crossed that that doesn't happen. But again, you get the idea of, I tell a lot of my clients who are either using a cane or a walker to make sure they use it, constantly reminding them. So if we know friends or family that have it and they don't, and they should be doing it, the best thing we can do is to give them tough love and say, hey, you got to grab that cane, grab that walker, because the worst thing is that we don't want to be there when we could have helped out and doing everything we can to avoid taking a little spill. And again, this kind of goes back to what I was just mentioning a few moments ago with the seniors who are experiencing any type of signs and symptoms. We can kind of look out for that as well, or for ourselves too, for that matter. If we feel like this could be affected from any type of just warning signs that are affecting just our imbalance and our instability. We've all experienced that at one point. And for the most part, if we did, most likely we did not fall, because that's the statistics. Again, about 3/4 of us would be able to kind of catch ourselves and brace ourselves. And if we do fall, again, try to fall the best way to mitigate things so that we don't hurt ourselves any worse. So again, I just encourage everybody that when you get a chance or opportunity to not only, again, this goes for ourselves, but if you're with friends and family, just taking a look and assessing what their home looks like. Are there opportunities to create better ways that people would have less chance, like, for example, installing grab bars or ramps and stairs and things like that? Just basically decluttering. That's one of the best ways to enhance somebody that doesn't take a fall, when it doesn't have to happen. Because again, it's just completely unintentional, and it's always pretty much an accident. Nobody would fall on purpose, right? It kind of like the old joke of, like, if you've gone skiing, you've heard this when the instructor tells you, don't worry, I'm going to teach you how to fall. And in your mind, you're thinking, no, teach me not how to fall, not teach me, make sure I don't fall, right? It's the same thing with, like, when we learn that in sports and activities. It starts from infancy too. Like when we're kids, you see kids running around, they're falling all the time, tumbling. But yet, statistically, they're not in the hospitals being looked at by the doctors. Why is that? Because one of the things is they're more malleable, they're durable, they roll. It's exactly. They're not falling like a tree, like sometimes you'll see with people doing that. Other times when people are falling, you'll notice that, again, they're not as strong, but also I mentioned that their muscle mass is not as strong to protect them when they're taking that fall as well. So again, just reiterating the use of assisted devices whenever possible. Another thing to look at is your footwear too. One of the things that we can do is just properly wearing shoes. It's a great, some of these places that have these opportunities to assess your feet and to have you in the right shoe, they might cost a premium of doing so, but it might be worth it, because in the long run, that might be a good return on investment, figuring out what type of foot do I have in terms of, is my arch too high? Do I pronate my foot? Do I need insoles and arch supports? So that's really important as well too, because for the most part, most of the day, most of us, if we're walking out and about, we would have some type of shoes on. So, ladies, high heels, we want to make sure that we be extra careful when we're out there, right? Because again, you're cutting down the surface area on, your own surface when you're walking. Going back to the medication review too, is just basically, looking at what medicines we're taking and how to make sure that, Deborah mentioned earlier, really good advice is to drink a lot of water, because if we're taking anything that's highly potent or, really strong, then we want to make sure that we're absorbing and getting enough water and hydration, because that's a common, especially during the summer, as you know, here in Atlanta, gosh, with the heat and the humidity, we have to make sure that we're rehydrating, especially if we're taking any type of special medication as well. And then if we have any types of, like me, I wear contact lenses. If I didn't have my contact lenses on right now, all of you just look like gray shadows to me. I couldn't even tell like anything. It would just look like black and white contrast. I couldn't see colors because I have very, very poor vision without my own contacts on. So whenever possible, if we wear contact lenses or glasses, or same thing with hearing too, hearing aids, we want to make sure that we're using all of our senses, because the minute we cut down a sense, then one of those senses is going to really cut down our chances of being able to keep ourselves stable. So the better that we can feel around and touch and see and hear, then we want to make sure that we are aware of our surroundings, so to speak. I mentioned this right at the start of the presentation. This is where we really dig into kind of the meat and potatoes of the presentation. Strength, balance, flexibility, those are what we want to enhance to, again, cut down the stats of being able to be one of those that aren't going to fall. Because earlier I mentioned, the healthcare industry, as far as falls go and concerned with the hospitals, It is a $50 billion industry. So we're talking about a lot of time, money, resources, costs. I mentioned also at the beginning of the presentation as well that how this can affect us personally, professionally, psychologically, but also financially, right? It can have an economic impact on us where we might miss work, we might miss opportunities, so it's an opportunity cost. We might have to spend money that we didn't want to on ourselves in terms of healing and getting better and going to the doctor and taking new medications or having surgery, God forbid, things like that we want to make sure that we're avoiding. So when we talk about exercise, number one, and this goes for pretty much anybody across the board, even elite athletes have to do this, you have to get what's called a health history questionnaire. Everybody in this room, I'm sure, has done some variation of having a fitness evaluation in terms of, what medications do you take? What are your injury risk assessments? What are some of the other health assessments that you have in terms of cardiovascular disease and, cancer in the family, et cetera, obesity? And so once we get past the whole part of knowing what our readiness questionnaire is and answering that, we want to take a look at some of the balance exercises. And this is the fun part now. Here's where it begins in terms of what I can show. So when we look at the screen, standing on one foot, heel to toe, I'll just go ahead and come on up here. And again, I promised you I'm not going to fall on purpose, but at least. So basically, if I am standing on one foot like this, I've immediately cut 50% of the help that I have to be able to do this. You can challenge yourself and do it on the other foot, right? For symmetry. Anybody in here with yoga, you realize the different types of yoga poses, and they work a lot on that in terms of cutting down our stability. You've probably seen what's called the heel to toe walk, also known as the sobriety test, because that's what it looks like kind of. You want to walk in a straight line, heel to toe, very slowly, and you want to make sure that you're straight up while you're doing it because, and again, it feels hard to do it. You notice one of the things I did immediately was kind of airplane my arms out, and that helps because that creates a little bit more surface area while we're doing this. And you don't want to look down while you're doing it. And I'll tell you why here in a little bit, because that's one of the ways that could throw our balance off and that we could fall. When we talk about the exercises that we do, there's other types that we're working, strong legs, strong upper body, and everything that we're working, we want to make sure that we're always engaging our core and strengthening our abdominals. By a show of hands, who in the room does any type of strength training on a regular basis? Oh, wow, almost 100% of the hands went up on that one, so that's great. I would encourage to keep that up, and all of us have modifications that we could do. So if we can't do, for example, a squat, well, we could do what's called a chair squat, like a sit to stand. Everybody's done that. Or if we can't get on the floor and do a push-up, we can do a wall push-up, right? So, we can just kind of go like this against the wall and test ourselves and do something that looks like that. There's a lot of different modifications that we could do. A lot of exercises that we could do to stretch the legs are very important because, again, that's our foundation. That's what's going to keep us from falling. The stronger and more flexible and limber we are in the legs and lower body, the better chances we have of standing. So one of the things I mentioned earlier, challenge your balance, try to grab a leg and stand on one leg if possible, things like that. Put a foot out in front and just hold a squat. These are just different types of exercises that we can do to kind of balance, but also stretch to increase that flexibility. A lot of these are at your resources. If you take like any type of group exercise class, or if you go on YouTube, you can type any of these, and I'm telling you, for free, and look them up, and they're all available right there at the fingertip. Core strength, so vital and so crucial. Core, meaning everything like kind of in the hips and the glutes and like right around the hip area and the abdominals, obliques, lower back. This is kind of, in addition to your foundation of your legs, really engaging and helping you so that you're standing properly with good posture and good form. Because the stronger this is, the more chances you have of increasing your agility and your athleticism. The weaker our core is, we're going to, not be as having a good chance of kind of standing our ground, so to speak, if we're going to be pushed and accidentally kind of shoved or what have you and thrown off. And so if we have a strong core, we can kind of make sure that we're really working on that kind of concept of standing strong and being strong, whenever you can. One of the great things that you can do with any type of core exercise, I'll try to stand maybe here where people can see me, is a plank. We know what a plank looks like, and I'll explain why a plank would be one of the best exercises to do in fall prevention. You could do a high plank. You can turn this into a side plank. Some of these look very, very advanced, but as I mentioned, you can do modifications. If that looks too hard, then just do it on your knees. Start there first, right? Or, do a side plank on the knees if we need to. There's plenty of modifications. In my opinion, everybody in this room, there's not any exercise you can't do without some type of variation of modifying it to make it a little bit not as hard, basically. Proper posture is so important and crucial too, whether we're standing or sitting at all times. We should be engaging our core. We should be looking like you've heard like a ballerina, where you pull the pin up and you're nice and tall, your chin is high, your shoulders are back, your chest is stuck out, and your abdominals are really tight. You should be doing that at all times. And so one of the worst things that we could do, if, like, for example, we're sitting right now, what you would not want to do when you're sitting is kind of look like the letter C. So, for example, if I took this up here where you can see me, the worst way for me to sit, unfortunately, and you can kind of look, I probably look like a reverse C right now. And unfortunately, if people are sitting and when we're watching, like Sunday, the Super Bowl game, right, or whatever, pick something, we're sitting mostly like this, or if we're driving, if we're sitting in the office chair, we need to be sitting, your spine was designed to be like the letter S, not letter C. So meaning, to create that perfect, that S, as I mentioned earlier, if the lower back is engaged and tight with the core nice and strong, that's going to create that kind of S curve with your chest up and your shoulders back. And that includes the neck, by the way, as well, too. So that's why I said to be looking straight up like that. That should be for driving. That should be when we're watching Netflix. That should be when we're at the dining table. And it feels kind of awkward. It doesn't feel natural for most people, but that is truly the way that it should be. So I'm just going to set this here for a second. So I mentioned a few minutes ago about why it wasn't a good idea in terms of with our stepping and our posture, that you wanted to make sure that when you take steps, you don't want to look down. I said that you should be looking straight. And here's why I said that. To give you a visual, most of the times as we age and advance, you'll see people walking something that looks like this. What I've done now, there's several things going on. I've created that letter C again. I'm looking down. I'm not looking straight. And you can notice my feet are kind of shuffling and going in shorter steps, right? When we turned about 15 or 16 years old, sometime in our life, some of us, it might have been 5 years ago, maybe, I don't know. Some of us could have been 10 years ago. We got a driver's license and we sat down, we did a practical driving assessment with our instructor, who should have told us not to look myopically, which means right in front of you, right? That'd be the worst thing. What we should be doing, what did they tell us, is to broaden, right, a 180-degree peripheral vision of just being able to kind of see everything from left to right in a big arc. So that way when you're driving, you kind of see what's going on. Well, the same thing with walking too. I always tell my clients to look straight and just create your good surroundings around you. And, by the way, by walking in big steps and keeping your posture nice and in good alignment. And also, not speeding up and going too fast. That's one of the best ways to fall. When you see people kind of shuffling and then boom, they can fall, and that can happen. I always tell people that with being safe, that's going to be a lot better than going too fast. For the most part, when it comes to balance, if you take your time, and I need to tell myself that sometimes because I tend to talk too fast once in a while. So when we slow down, we're able to kind of get caught up in terms of what's going on. So as I said, to just reiterate on walking, challenge yourself to take big steps and don't shuffle, and go a little slowly, and don't go too fast while you're doing it. So one of the best things that you can do is to challenge yourself on that exercise is literally just put something on the floor, whether it's just a pile of laundry or grocery bags or what have you, or the house cat, and step over it, but not stepping on its tail, of course. And that would be a great way to challenge it. Say, how high can I step over it? Because then that's going to lead into, as I mentioned earlier, training functionally those legs, both in terms of being, again, more balanced and not unstable while you're doing it. Breathing's so important as well. You always hear this whenever you're exercising. You always hear about taking deep breaths into the nose, out through the mouth. Controlled breathing is really good too. This kind of goes to the mindfulness of what's going on when you're trying to increase your balance as well. But it's so important, basically, not to do what's called the Valsalva maneuver. You don't want to hold your breath and that happens a lot too, because sometimes we might get nervous. Sometimes we go on an airplane or what have you, just thrown in a situation, we might get a little nervous, and that can cause anxiety, and that can cause our blood pressure to go up, that can cause our heart rate to increase, and that can really lead to stress. And so the way to combat that is to control the breathing, practice breathing exercises. That's, again, using YouTube as an example. You can literally type in to the search bar, free controlled breathing exercises, and there'll be a whole 20, 30-minute session. You can just follow along right there. And you want to progress, as you're going along by doing it. So in terms of, I mentioned, with challenging your balance and stability, you want to make sure that each time you're getting better and better. So for example, if I was going to fall forwards, and this is now getting to the point of avoiding falls and what to do if we are going to take a fall, falling forwards, to best practice that, because sometimes that could happen. Well, what might happen? We might accidentally stub our toe or walk over something, or like I did, I fell down last year. It could happen to anybody. We want to practice that by kind of decelerating into a push-up, and that way we functionally know that we're able to manage to do that. So if I was to tell you for your exercises, your homework, I know you were already given homework, but here's some more. When you get home, is to practice decelerating on that fall. Like literally put yourself in that situation. You just accidentally fell forwards. Now I'm going to decelerate the fall, meaning I'm not falling like a tree, right? Instead, I'm decelerating. I'm making sure that I'm slowing down. I'm using my chest and my arms and my core, everything, my legs, to really blockade the momentum down so that I'm slowing and then I'm getting better. So that will be easier. If you're used to doing push-ups, or if that's part of your exercise routine, that's going to feel normal and functional too. That's why they call it functional fitness. It's something that you're doing that's involved in everyday exercising. If, let's say you're going to fall backwards, well, when you fall backwards, that's, physicians and doctors will tell you that's the worst way to fall, really, given the chance. The reason is because this right here, our head, that's the worst thing to hit when you fall down on any type of fall, because that protects our brain. Our brain protects and controls everything else from our central nervous system. If we're going to fall, the worst, again, as I mentioned, if I was to fall here like a tree and just look like this, boom, that would be terrible, because all my surface area has just been taken on that one brunt blow. And unfortunately, we probably know somebody that that's happened to. But when you're falling backwards, one of the things that you want to do immediately is to go sideways. So if I knew I was falling backwards, I know immediately I'm falling backwards, one of the best things to go is like this, kind of to just try to mitigate my fall so that I'm taking some of the pressure on my legs, my arm, instead of just completely running my head, okay? So I was a wrestler by trade in sports, and that was something that they taught us too. Very similar to skiing, like they taught us how to fall the right way, because it's going to happen. Same thing, when you're skiing, but in wrestling, when we fall on our back, we were always taught to make sure to go down sideways, okay? Hence, why would we try a side plank, as I mentioned earlier, right? Because that's going to build those muscles and strengthen us so that we're used to that and knowing that it's going to feel normal and we're not shocked, right, by the fall. Because, again, it's going to happen. Unfortunately for me, when I went down the stairs, that's not an easy way to practice that. Let me practice how to fall down stairs the right way. There is no right way to fall down the stairs, unfortunately. In my case, it was best that I didn't hit my head. I didn't, so that's good. That's the best. And so if it was just a shoulder dislocation in my case, it could happen. But again, what the point is that when you do fall, and it's going to happen if it does, then you want to make sure you're just going to go with it. And I know one of the people that was mentioning about the rolling too, that's important. If you're going to fall, another thing is just kind of roll with it, because then what's happened is that in that case, that is kind of just taken that surface area and just really decreased it. And it's added in that deceleration I was talking about too. So there's many, many ways you could do that with tumbling. I talked about kids earlier. They're natural at that. When we're children, that just comes normally. You fall, and you see that happen all the time. They're running all the time. but it's very rare that they end up in the emergency room because of a fall like that. Most times, kids will end up in an emergency room because they were probably up on a tree or on a building that they shouldn't have been on, and then they fall, right? That most likely doesn't happen to us because of that reason. Our falls would happen because of something that happens if we're just, again, we might have tripped over something and we might have just lost our balance. I mentioned the footwear earlier, and I want to just pay attention to that as well too, because this is important with the progression part. There is a concept known as toe yoga. Has anybody heard of toe yoga in this class? Yes, we have somebody. So if you want to know more about toe yoga, the young lady with the velvet purple shirt, you want to ask her about it. That's basically a concept of increasing mobility, stability, and dexterity with your feet. And when you're doing something, and it literally is what it sounds like. We know that yoga is an exercise that we could do to improve our balance and everything else. Well, in our proprioceptive nerves in our feet, the best way to increase that is by challenging and increasing the strength and the mobility of our feet in terms of working our toes. So check that out when you get a chance too. Toe yoga. There's a gentleman by the name of Dr. Peter Attia from Canada. He's an MD. He's a cancer surgeon from Johns Hopkins, wrote a book known as Outlive, and he covers this in that book. It's just wonderful in terms of, that was the first exposure I had to it. So it was only a year ago that I even learned about what that is. And so, in general, with exercise, and this goes for anything else, if we're practicing any of these, don't push yourself past your limits to what you think that you can or can't do. In other words, I'd encourage you to, if in doubt, don't. And what I mean by that is, if you have any questions or like, should I give this a try, just don't do it, please. Because you want to make sure that you don't take any unnecessary chances. Even one of the things that I showed, you might say, well, he did it, maybe I could do it too. Just start slowly, and then, like I said earlier, just progress. So maybe to start some of those exercises, you could even start in this position right here and just do like a half a push-up. And then if we know we can do that, then we're going to say, all right, now I know I can do that. Let me do about 5 of them every day. And then as you get better on that, okay, I'm going to try on my toes and do it from there. What can I do from there? You're just going to push yourself to, not over the limit, but I always say like kind of to fatigue, to exhaustion, so that way you're not pushing too much. And then also, I encourage this as well, not only being consistent, make it a habit. A lot of this is psychology, a lot of this is behavior modification. Just like anything else, like Deborah was mentioning at the beginning of today's presentation, doing things that you're going to stick to and hold yourself accountable to it. So, if at the end of this presentation, when we leave out of here, trying to think about what's one thing that I can try to get better at, what's one kind of area that I'd like to improve my, level of agility or flexibility, or maybe my balance, my stability. Some of those exercises would be very, very beneficial to be able to do that. It's important to really focus on your mindset. I mentioned earlier about the controlled breathing. This is kind of going back into that mindset. Deborah touched on this at the very beginning. One of the things I tell all my clients is don't watch TV, don't watch the news, don't go on the internet. There are so many things that could really stress us out and raise our blood pressure, like, again, watching the news or looking at the stock market and looking at our own investments or accounts, right? Doing taxes, like I'm doing my tax returns right now. I'm having a lot of, you talk about stress, or other things like social media, especially the generation that I'm currently involved in. They're just like obsessed with any types of social media that like drives their lives. And I refuse to be part of that. It's just something that when that happens, in my opinion, that really destroys and challenges the mindset and our focus. So to increase our mindful awareness, we need to put stuff into our body that's not toxic. But just like we feed our body good water and nutrition, well, we also need to feed it good information. So, for example, we want to learn about fall prevention, maybe, nutrition, diet, exercise, longevity, men's health, women's health, back health, cardiovascular, respiratory disease, diabetes, how to avoid cancer, things like that. That book that I just mentioned a few moments ago, Outlive. Things like that are going to be stimulating, that are beneficial, that are actually good for us, that we want to learn how to improve and better ourselves. So that's why I said that just a few moments ago. What's one thing that we could do that would help us? I'll share you right now my 2 big things this year. I haven't been successful with it. With the new year got rolling in already 1 month down, and I've failed miserably, was to cut down on caffeine and coffee and also to improve my sleep hygiene or sleep more. Okay, I have failed on both accounts, unfortunately, but I'm going to try to get better. And so again, I'm not only throwing out the gauntlet for you, but again, as I mentioned, just be very vulnerable and transparent. We're all open to being able to improve ourselves as well. But I can say I have not fallen in 1 year exactly. So that is really cool. I guess I'm good on that, right? Yeah. So, um, and then, if it does happen, if we are to fall or somebody close to us falls, what do we do? Well, anybody in here taking first aid or CPR class, CPR certificate? Great, I love it. If you didn't raise your hand or if you need to refine it, I challenge you, you can do it for free. There's plenty of resources that you can get that done. I'm sure even including this place. Whenever you can, try to really hone in and sharpen, because again, as I mentioned earlier, if we're familiar with it and we're used to something that we're learning and trying to replicate, and we're kind of going through the functions and the motions of it, then most likely if something does happen, we'll be prepared, not with a deer in the headlights look, but okay, that person just fell, what do? We revert back to what did we learn? You go call 911, you get down there, check, is there a pulse, is there breathing? So, again, just to kind of reiterate that emergency safety comes first, and make yourself a checklist. There's a lot of great resources and websites that have things where you can actually go on and kind of do what's called a self-awareness check of yourself. How vulnerable am I to falling? It'll ask you questions like, how many times a week do you exercise? How many of those exercises are involved with strength training? It'll ask you questions about, on your strength training exercise. They'll get real specific, like what are you doing? What are the exercises you're doing? What do you do in a daily routine? Do you drink alcohol? Do you smoke? Are you susceptible to overeating? What have you? All of these factors are included with a few slides ago when we talk about strength and exercise, fitness, health, wellness, nutrition, and you name it. And if there are people that you're involved with, whether it's, again, immediate family or maybe one of the assisted living places, or at a place like here or a fitness center or you name it, and you have the opportunities to help or maybe give help and give guidance, I'll tell you one of the best things, like the certified nurse practitioners at some of these places around where I'm at, like in Buckhead, one of the things we have to really reiterate to those CNPs is telling them, hey, make sure that they're drinking enough water, that they're, making sure that they're drinking enough water and eating enough food and moving. I mean, that's the key, really. As we age, we want to make sure that we're giving ourselves good nutrition, rehydrating, and moving. That's so important and vital. So if you could share that with others and tell them to do that, and at the same point, staying motivated. That's what it comes down to. I said it before, is just really getting moving. You are your own success story. That's what this is all about. You can be the best version of yourself. From here, when we leave out of here, we can say, okay, now I've learned a few things about that. Let me take a look at some of the other things. And again, getting back to the exercising, there's a couple other things you could do on your own. In terms of exercise, if you're going to, let's see, maybe if I show you from this side, no, maybe I should have this on here. Yeah, that's better. Now you can see, if you hold on and you do some of these every day, because again, that mimics that fall right there. If I do about 20 of these right here, I'm going to feel this right leg that's stationary really burning, and I'm taking the other leg and moving it here. I'm doing like a half a squat, and I'm really engaging and both working the muscles in that, but also functionally knowing that that's what it's going to feel like if I go down for a walk. And I showed you earlier the one where you decelerate and you try to do that push-up when you're on the floor. Try to maybe challenge yourselves on some of those, or even, and again, don't do this on concrete, of course, or this is carpeted. You could get a yoga mat or even a thicker mat and try some of those other ones where when you're going for a back fall, going on your side, try that. Do it on real thick carpet. And then, this sounds crazy, but then you could challenge yourself, go outside on the grass and try it. And I really mean it. Like I tell clients, go out there and make it as close to a real situation as possible. And, that's basically what you want to do in terms of whenever you're trying to put yourself in situations, like I said, to really refine your balance and just put situations that are available so that way you can test yourself. And that's pretty much it as far as fall prevention goes for this. And I'll go ahead and leave it open to questions and answers now. So I guess maybe I saw your hand in the green vest first. So I guess what we can do is maybe have a question and then we can take, rotate it. Yes, sir.
I had a good friend, and she loved to walk her dog. And one time she was walking the dog, and the dog lunged forward after a squirrel. It pulled her over forward. She fractured her skull and died 2 or 3 weeks later.
I'm sorry.
So, of course, one of the things one learns is to have something, some way that you can let go of the doggone rope as soon as that happens.
Very good. I like that. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, absolutely. I'm so sorry to hear that story, but you're right. That's very, very good with being able to just release and then, because the instinct would be to hold on. You're right about that. Thank you again. Yes, sir.
When you were demonstrating how to fall forward, you had your arms and your hands out like this. I was told never to try to fall onto your hand or wrist.
That's true. Yeah, or dislocate your shoulder like I did. Absolutely. There's no right or wrong way instinctively to when we're falling. Now, when you have your arms out, that will help brace and cover some of the surface area. Because what's worse than having your arms out is not having your arms out and just taking that fall like a tree. That's the worst right there. So it's going to depend on so many factors and variables. You're right. Like, for example, like when you're falling and, what that's going to, instead of bracing it like that, when I'm talking about practicing the deceleration, you're doing this in case that is to happen. You're doing the push-ups to strengthen those triceps and chest in case you do take the fall that way. When I mentioned earlier about rolling would actually be probably the best way to do it, because then you're taking your inertia and you're just totally depleting all the surface area with you. Okay, so right. So when you're having your arms out, that is instinctive. Most people would do that, and if that is going to happen, again, I would just encourage you to just go ahead and try practicing, not practicing falling on your arms, but practicing to get those muscles strengthened for when you're doing that. Because you're right, that is very common. And also, on top of that, to really prevent, one of the worst areas physicians don't like to see is when someone breaks their leg or their hip. So if you know that you are falling, let's say on the hip, it's almost better if I was to break a wrist or an elbow or an arm than knocking my hip down at full force. Again, there's no right or wrong way, like in order of priority, say. So make sure that you first fall on this extremity and not on this one. There's no order like that. But it's really, it's so variable, it's complex. Everybody's going to be different when they're falling. You just have to do what's best at that point. Believe me, to even go a little further on that, when I was falling down the stairs, I almost regret grabbing the rail. I almost think maybe I shouldn't have, and maybe I should have just done something. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, if I did do the wrong thing by doing it. It just felt instinctive. It just happens like within a blink of a, yes, exactly. You're right. Yeah, but good point. Yes. Yes, sir.
Two things. One, you said, don't look down. But I listen to music or wander through the neighborhood, and the pavement's not even, so I'm always looking down.
Good point. Okay, great question. So to correct, let me back up. What I should say is don't look down all the time, basically, when you're walking. That's one. You're right. This goes to the surroundings. I mentioned this at the beginning, like there might have been wires around. I'm constantly always looking around my area too. Like my head's like 180-degree swivel, like always, looking at things because I'll make sure of my surroundings. So if I'm going for a walk in the neighborhood and broken street, concrete, for sure, I would look down maybe every 3 to 5 seconds just as I'm walking. No different than using my earlier analogy. When you're driving, you were taught, all of us were taught, to be what? Looking at the rearview mirror, looking at the side view mirror, looking out the back, right? All the time, constantly. We're not just fixated all the way straight. Like if I'm driving, I'm not going to just look straight right here, but I should be paying attention at the rearview mirror. I should be looking this way and that, just to get that periphery, that 180-degree usage. So with the looking down, what I'm getting at is that the posture, if I'm walking and I'm looking in the neighborhood like this the whole time, that's going to create this imbalance of posture, and that's going to create also the focus of looking down and not knowing what's around my surroundings completely. So that's what I was just kind of getting at with the kind of just, the eyes fixated and making sure that you're always looking and just paying attention, whatever direction.
Yeah. The only thing I ever got out of high school gym was poke my arm and that just rolled.
Yeah, that kind of goes to what he was saying too, in terms of like if you're going to roll, if you know you will, then yeah, you kind of just tuck it in and just go with it. You're like as a wrestler, we did a million of those. We would actually tuck our arm in, and we roll it. Same thing with skiing too. When you go skiing, they're going to tell you to do that as well too. They don't want you to fall and just take the whole brace of the brunt of breaking the arm. So yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, good point. Thank you.
Your knees work amazingly well.
Knees.
Mine are a little creaky. And, what do you, I mean, like, you have a rock on your knee. I mean, it's like, ouch.
Oh, you like with the fall demonstrations? Well, so, okay, for one thing, this is carpeted. If this was concrete, I don't know if I would have done the same type of falling, as far as the demonstrations. And another, I'm a wrestler I've wrestled for 25 years. So at this point, I don't even feel it when I fall now. It doesn't even feel, normal. But with the practicing, it goes back to what I was saying. If you're going to practice, put a nice thick mat down, try it on something very, very soft. Like one of my clients that I see at the in-home, he has this thick memory foam that they sell at like Costco or Sam's Club. And you've seen it. They look like little puzzle pieces. We've seen it like with little kids that they use in activity, like playrooms. I would definitely encourage something like that. And then maybe even on top of that, like a thick blanket or towels or what have you. That way you can practice it without hurting the knees and things like that. Yeah. So it's just practice, over time. Yeah, certainly. Oh, yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
So I do squats every day. It helps my lower back and my hips. And
Hold it up to your mouth.
sorry, I need to repeat it.
I heard it, but unless yeah.
And I hold on to like the door frame so that I can go down as low as possible. Feels better. And I was just informed last week that it's terrible for my knees. My knees are fine so far. Do I need to stop doing that? What were you doing?
Yeah.
Squats. I do squats every day for my lower back and my hips.
So,
Feels great.
and the question is, are you saying that
Am I destroying my knees?
because you're holding on to something or because you're doing squats?
So low.
Oh, good question. Oh, okay. Yeah, I follow you. Yeah. No, not at all. Absolutely not. You're going to hear different opinions from medical professionals, fitness professionals, and everybody has their own opinion. Like doctors will always tell you now, today, don't ever run, for example. Like running is one of the worst. I agree with that one, just from personal experience, from my lower back and my knees, from running, the joint compression. But with squats or even deep squats, I'm of the opinion, no. I would agree. Here's your litmus test. Like you said, are you in pain right now from doing that? No, right? Has that been helping? I would say yes. What works best for you? We're all different, but I don't necessarily agree with the general blanket of saying don't do real deep squats or that's terrible for your knees. I don't agree with that so much as I would say, just as a precaution, be careful, use proper form. When you're doing a squat, for example, don't have the knees go past the toes like that. You want to make sure that you're doing a squat so that your butt goes back and your knees are behind your toes like this, like you're doing it, I'm sure. And you're going down low plenty. I mean, that's fine. I mean, as long as you're doing it with correct form and doing an adequate amount of repetitions, like say 15, 20 repetitions, what have you, I don't see a problem with that at all. Not so, yeah. So I don't know what the thought on that would be, but again, I think everybody's going to have something like maybe a personal experience and say, I did that and it hurt me, but if it's helping you and you're not having pain from it, I would just say keep going. Yeah, for sure.
We got two more.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. So, yes, sir.
One of the parts of my routine, if you will, is running. You said now that that's not necessarily a good thing. Over the past maybe 15 years or so, I've taken maybe half a dozen falls. What I found was that as you start to get in better shape, you go faster. And the worst falls I've taken were at that point in time. I find myself now that I'm getting up to age that I take shorter steps, maybe more jogging than running.
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of sharing that as a precaution because some of those falls were pretty hard. It's not any fun kissing the concrete.
That's a good point, and like you said, the reason why they were worse is because of the acceleration. I mentioned the acceleration, the speed that you were going at. When you multiply that by speed and the concrete, unfortunately, that is going to be worse. You're right. I would agree. That goes back to what I was saying: is just take your time and maybe slow it down. But for me, running is not the way to go for my joints. Yeah. But thank you. Yes, yes, sir. Last question.
That was good. One common thing that happens to older people is what you call posture hypertension. You stand up, you're sitting down for a long time, and you stand up all of a sudden, especially if you're dehydrated or warm weather, taking some certain medications. And the reason for that is your blood pressure drops and your blood goes to your head, then it goes to your feet. So the trick for this is start, as you stay hydrated and stand up slowly. And if you feel dizzy, just stand back or just lean forward, just for a few seconds. Otherwise, you may lose your balance and fall down. It's a very common problem.
Absolutely. Very good advice, too. Very well said. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with that as well, too. Great questions and great comments, too. Thank you. That's very, very helpful. I see that the time is right of the hour. I think it's high noon, so I want to thank everybody for your time, and I appreciate coming out. So thank you. Nice to meet everybody.
Thank you. That's great to hear your comment and differences. Like running really works for you, and squatting really works for you. And I did hear one thing that I'm taking, which is a very crystal clear instruction for posture.
Okay, thank you,
Not a
John.
C,
Appreciate
but
it.
an S.
Thanks so
And
much.
I always think about my sitting posture, and as soon as he said that, I moved to an S, and it was like, wow. So, I hope you all got something crystal clear today. And again, thank you so much for your time. That was a gift of love.
Thanks.